morning. This is September the 9th. It's a Wednesday. My name is Dennis Karachuk. If you say it in Ukrainian, it would be Karachuk. And I grew up right over there, just a few blocks from here. If you look, you'll see the background. That's the LA City skyscraper there. The way it looks now, it's really smoky because we have a lot of fires going on in the area. The Bobcat fire being the biggest one. And so that's why the air quality is pretty bad today. Anyway, I kind of wanted to do this short film kind of documentary about Elephant Hill, where we're at today. It's in the northeast part of Los Angeles. Originally it was called Bairdstown, El Sereno was, and in 1916 it became Bairdstown. It was pretty much all ranches around here and things like that, but what happened was Henry Huntington, who had the Huntington Library and stuff like that, well, he owned a lot of property. Him and his friends got together and they built this Pacific Electric railroad with red cars. So you were able to work downtown Los Angeles and be able to take and have transportation to go home to, Highland Park, San Marino if you were that fortunate, Alhambra, all the surrounding areas, El Sereno and stuff like that. So he actually built the railroad so that he could sell property after it was all subdivided. And speaking of subdividing, I have a very famous surveyor from the area who worked here probably about 40 years. His name's Russ Beck.
My name's Russell Beck, and I'm a licensed land surveyor. I worked at Grimes Surveying and Mapping for 42 years, which is located right down here on Huntington Drive, south of Elephant Hill. Elephant Hill was subdivided in 1903 and originally was going to be part of Pasadena, but in 1915 it was annexed into the city of Los Angeles. There's hundreds of lots up here and streets on Elephant Hill. The entire subdivision was laid out like the ground was flat. It's all rectangular, straight streets, and just like out in the San Fernando Valley. And of course, none of them can be built or could be built because of the terrain here. Shortly after it was subdivided, at some point I was told one of the railroad companies bought or owned quite a few or most of the lots up here and would give away a free lot with every train ticket from back east to Los Angeles. And people, of course, would come out here, to see their free lot. They'd take the red car or whatever down Huntington Drive, and all there was a big hill of nothing, and they couldn't tell where their lots were at all. So every once in a while we would get a call to survey one of the lots. Someone would inherit it, or they would buy it really cheap at a tax sale, and we would usually try to talk them out of it because the cost of the survey was more than the lot was worth. And occasionally we could talk them out of it, tell them basically where the lot was, and they'd look at it and go, yeah, you're right. But some people would insist, so we would insist on getting 100% up front because we knew they wouldn't be pleased with the result. And sure enough, the lot would be in hundreds of feet from any improved street on the side of a hill or wherever, and they would have had to improve the street and put in utilities before they could even build a house. So it just never happened. The property can't really be developed the way that it's subdivided right now. In the future, maybe someone would buy up all the lots and then re-subdivide it into useful roads that followed the contours of the hills. But I was told in the 80s that a group of developers tried to do that, and the neighbors formed a group that stopped them. So hopefully it'll remain like this, but you never know.
My name is John Larson. I grew up in South Pasadena. I rode here in the mid-70s. Kind of motocross heyday right then. Had Husqvarna, CZ, Mako. I used to go over to Jim West's house, which was just a couple hundred yards from here, and his garage was right on the street, so I'd go watch him work on the bikes for hours and ask all kinds of stupid questions, but he was the local hero right then, so I used to watch him. A couple of other local hot shoes. There was Jim Tarantino. He eventually, they called him the King of Saddleback. He used to ride here all the time. He'd come over and get in front of me and dump the clutch and roost on me in the turns. And then Larry Brooks, who I think he went on to ride for Honda and some other company. He was up here on the little Yamaha 80, and he was flying around here. So there's some good riders up here. Used to come up here in the winter when right after it rained and the grass was tall, and you just make your own track. You just go up the side of the hill and make a turn, make a new track, and come up here after high school. There'd be 4 or 5 of my buddies up here ride around. And I never actually did get chased by cops. I was lucky I didn't get caught, but some of them did. Anyway, nice to still see it up here. Pretty much it's just like it did then. Same tracks and everything. So.
Are you still riding now, John?
I haven't ridden for years. I still have. I got a 1980 RM400 that I bought brand new, and last time I went and rode it, a little out of shape to hang on to it, but I just can't bear to sell it because it's a neat bike. So maybe someday I'll get. I got to get in shape so I can go out and ride with Rick Chew and the fast guys.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's my story.
All right. Thanks, John. There he goes, the legend. Hello, Dennis back again. Anyway, this time I'm wearing, well, I had it on before, but I didn't mention it. The famous Ed Kretz, he was called the Iron Man, and he rode, he was the first person to win Daytona in 1937. And he rode an Indian, and they were hand shift bikes. That means that you didn't have a hand clutch. You had to do everything with your foot and shift this way. And I don't know of anybody, but I'm sure back then there was probably people riding hand shift bikes up here, because I'm sure that, you know, back in the 60s and the 70s, we weren't the only people that, you know, had been doing any riding. What I would like to do now is introduce probably the most famous rider besides Jim West of Elephant Hill, and a good friend of mine, Rick Chew. Please come up, Rick. Time for an interview.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
I owe you.
How much?
My name is Rick Chew. I lived in this area in Elephant Hills here since 1963. I've ridden up here from 63 through 1976 or so. This was a happening place back in the 60s. Cars would be lined up along this road here. People would unload their motorcycles and ride throughout these hills. It'd be better if you ask me questions, or how do you want to work
Yeah, we'll
this?
do it that way.
Okay.
So, what was your first bike?
First bike was a 1962, I believe, Honda C110 press frame 50.
And I'm not mistaken, I think that bike started in 1961, and according to Tim Means, the expert when it comes to early Honda cars and motorcycles, they were also push-rod motors.
Yes, they were.
And then the other one that was really popular back in the day, and everybody would modify them, they'd cut the rear fender off, was Yamaha 80. It was called a YG1. They had a rotary valve, they were a 2-stroke, and they started in 1963. So, what made you want to start riding motorcycles?
I started riding mini bikes earlier, and the hills were available. The hills were available, and my brother was riding motorcycles at that time as well.
Yeah, I remember you told me a story about he had a pre-unit Triumph that he used to pick you up from high school, junior high, and that was like his name was late Ralph, that was your brother, that really was legendary kind of in the area too.
Yeah, he would pick me up at Luther Burbank Junior High School right there on Figueroa, and we'd ride back, and at that time there was no helmet laws, so you didn't have to carry a helmet. And we'd go out to the desert and ride, but most of the time we'd ride up here in the Elephant Hills, and that's where I met Jim West. Jim West rode a YG1 press frame 80cc Yamaha that they had two in the family. They were used for camping, but Jim rode up here, and that's where I met him, and we would ride here literally every day after school and on weekends for years, and we just became good friends. I mean, he had his friends from the South Pass area, and I had my friends over here, but there was that mutual tie that we had, and that was motorcycles. So
Now, for those of you that don't know, and I'm just, the name Jim West, who is Jim West? Why do I hear his name so often related to Elephant Hill? What's the big deal with Jim West? What was so special about him?
he's fast. He was fast, and he eventually became a professional motocross rider. Even before he turned 17, I believe, he was riding in the pro class. We rode up here and raced, and we raced together out in the desert. Our first race was out in the desert, and actually my bike broke, that Honda 50 broke, and he continued on. It was a 2-lapper enduro scramble out in the desert, and the first loop he came back and he was tired, and he says he didn't want to ride, and his parents said, no, you got to finish. He says, okay, so he went back out there, he came back, and he ended up trophying.
Wow. Great
So he
story.
was pretty fast in the trail bikes as well. Then he got a Hodaka, and then we used to race up in Elsinore TT, do some TT racing, and he used to race down there in Trojan Raceway off of the Long Beach Freeway as well. And he continued riding motorcycles, and whereas as I got older, I ended up getting a job.
So, unfortunately, maybe not everybody knows, he was American motocross's first fatality. I believe he passed away in 1975 at Saddleback, is that right?
Yes, he did. On November 30th, 1975, he crashed at Saddleback, and I was there. And I last saw him at the Chapman Hospital, and where he eventually expired. And he was the first motocrosser that had ever died in a motocross race, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's, well, I'll let it go there. What age were you when you started riding then? Did you already say? And I maybe wasn't paying attention as usual?
Around 13.
Oh, okay. And so you met Jim West just by riding up here, then you just guys kind of ran into each other?
Yes, yeah. I mean, he lived up here on top of the hill over here on Hanscom, and I lived on Collis. So he was up on top of the hill, and I was on the bottom of the hill, and we could hear each other's motorcycles. And whenever we heard the other person's motorcycles, we'd just jump on ours and go up there and meet.
Yeah, didn't you have something? I remember there was some story you told me about. He rolled over, or you rolled. Was he in that Jeep that time that you guys crashed a Land
No.
Rover and you got the scar on your head?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was with Dave Harper.
Okay.
Dave Harper lived up here on Hanscom as well, and we were, him, his father, and myself were in Dave's Land Rover, and went up one of the hills here and didn't quite make it, and started going back, and he decided to turn, and we ended up rolling the Land Rover.
Remember when things started to really change was when the LAPD helicopters started to really come out here and chase everybody away and stuff like that. And also tell them about Jim West's story about when he was chased by the cops and he stopped and what he told them. I love this story.
Well, like I say, it used to be pretty busy up here, and the neighbors didn't really like open expansion chambers and dust up in this area here, so they circulated a petition to stop the riders from riding up here. And unfortunately, my mother signed that petition, and soon after, LAPD would show up on their training Harleys, stripped down Harley Davidsons, and try and catch us. And that
So
didn't
those
work
are-
out too well.
Those are the big Harleys. I mean, like you would see like electric glides and
Yes.
what they would
yeah.
use. They just took the lights and everything off of them.
They were their training
Okay.
motorcycles, and they eventually reverted to their personal, like 125, 250 Kawasaki Enduros, and they would come plain clothes and come up to a person and open up their vest and identify themselves as police officers and either get them out or write them a ticket. There's one instance where Jim and I were up here and observed these two individuals who looked like coppers, and I told Jim, I said, well, I'm going home, and he says, okay. So I went home, and later on I gave him a call and says, what happened? He said, nothing. He said, they came up to me and started accusing me of running away from them. I says, well, what'd you tell him? I said, I wasn't trying to run away from you. I said, do you know what I do for a living? And he said, no. He says, well, I'm a professional motocrosser rider, and if I wanted to get away from you, I could get away from you. He said, by the way, my dad's an LAPD lieutenant, and that was the end of it. So he went home. Another instance where we had contact with the police was over where it's called Debs Park right now. It's over in Avenue 52. We used to ride over there, and there was a police officer, motor cop by the name of Alexander. He was from the Northeast Division. And we saw a motor cop coming in, and again, we decided to split. And we went up towards Avenue 52, and then I darted down this one path, and someone had strung a wire across the path and hung me up, and I still have the scar. But when I got up, well, Alexander was right on me and told me to stay put, and I got to go back and pick up some ticket books that fell out of my saddlebags. And so he came back, and I was there, and he wrote me up a ticket. I only had my learner's permit, and then he asked where my friend was, and I said, what friend? He said, yeah, you know, it's going to be a lot easier on you if you tell me, you know, who your friend is. So I said, well, you see that house right up there? That's where he lives. And I got a phone call from Jim later on, and he says, why did you tell this guy where I lived? I said, well, he was supposed to be easier on me, Jim. He says, what happened? He says, well, he was waiting for me when I got home up there on the top of my driveway. I says, oh shoot, what happened? He says, no, nothing. My dad was home. So he got away with it another time. But I ratted out on my friend. Disgraceful.
Well, you've learned since then, I think.
I think so.
Did you realize at the time that you and Jim were probably the best known riders, or you guys were already legends of Elephant Hill?
No, we weren't legends. We were just young and stupid. People liked to watch us ride, and at times would even allow us to ride their motorcycle just to see if they'd make it up the hill. And we would ride.
In 1971, Bruce Brown did a film. Well, 1966 he did the film in the summer, and then he did the motorcycle film on Any Sunday in 1971. Do you think that film had any kind of an impact at all on changing motorcycle riding, especially off-road?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That film was the endless summer, motorcycles, endless summer, and who knows how many times we've all looked at that film and gave us the urge to go out and ride dirt bikes. And it was a wonderful film. If you haven't seen it, it's one you have to see.
Yeah, and I would, you know, even with 50 years later, I still think it stands the test of time. My own personal opinion, not because I'm from that era, but I just think it's a really well done film. Hello, I'm back again with Rick Chew. He's going to show us probably the most legendary hill that was when we were kids. This was like, you know, if you could make this, you were able to walk on water. It was called The Face, and Rick's going to point it out to us. It's kind of overgrown now. Mr. Chew?
Yeah. Well, over here There's a couple of trees on that far side with the dead branches on the right. Just to the left of it used to be the trail that went up there, and you approached it from a trail that started in or about maybe 50 feet away. That used to go down, and we used to call that the V, and go up the other way. But you'd approach it diagonally across and take a run and try and make the hill. But that was the big hill for the hills here. If you can make that, you're doing pretty good. At times when we were riding our 50 and 80 cc motorcycles, there's been a time where we actually swept the hill so we can get some traction. But that was during summertime break.
So I didn't have a bike that was that reliable to go to these different places to ride, but you had reliable stuff, I believe. Where would you ride? Besides Elephant Hill, around this area, what other places were there to ride?
Well, to the east, there was the new development here called the Altos, and we would ride over there to the east. And further to the west, the mountains, there's a mountain range between Collis and Monterey Road that we rode to get to Avenue 52, which was Monterey Road to the Pasadena Freeway or Griffith Avenue. And that was a nice area to ride. Those fire roads and hill climbs.
And what about the Alhambra Dump? Did you ever ride there?
That was near Valley Boulevard and the 710.
No, it was where the golf course is today, Almanzar Golf Course.
Oh.
That was the dump, and there was a place you could ride there. Because after 1971, the movie On Any Sunday that Bruce Brown did, that's when it seems like everything just happened, you know. I used to go to Ed Kretz to buy parts, and you'd have to stand in line and take a number. It was like 3 people deep at every counter. It was insane.
Well, there are many places I guess you could ride in this area here. That was one of them. Over in Rosemead on the riverbed down there, used to ride where Garvey and Rosemead is right about now.
Oh yeah.
And Valley Boulevard and the 710, where there's some commercials that they were building at that time. They used to ride over there in Baldwin Hills out in the...
Wow, now you're really getting out.
Yeah, out Baldwin Hills, we used to ride out there as well. I mean, there were a lot of nice places to ride back in the 60s, late 60s.
So this is about 1969, 1970, and I have a 1962, 1963 Tissot motorcycle. And I used to wash dishes at the Dragon Pro restaurant in Highland Park, corner of Avenue 60 and Monterey Road. And I made 95 cents an hour. And this Tissot I didn't know what I was doing, just like today, you know, and so I went to go try to put the cylinder over the piston where the rings are at, and I would break the rings. I did it twice. And to get the rings, I would have to get on a bus, and I'd have to go to Milne Brothers in Pasadena, bring them back, do this and that and that. So after the second time, you know, and the rings were like $6, so that was, you know, 6 hours of work. And so the second time, that was 12 hours, right? So one day I asked Rick, because he's the local motorcycle expert, fast rider, knows how to work on stuff too and everything. I asked him if he could put it together for me. And he says to me, he goes, yeah, no problem. But you got to do me a favor first. I go, well, what's that? You know, it was nothing kinky or weird or nothing. But so he asks me to rototiller his mom's front lawn, you know. And I got home from school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I rototillered it. And I don't think I had to come back the second day. I even might have done a little bit of the backyard. I originally started telling the story 2 to 3 days, and I think I stretched it to being a 2-week job, which is not right. I'm just kidding. So he came over after I rototillered his mom's place for probably about 4 or 5 hours worth of work, and he just took the cylinder. Within about 3 to 5 minutes, he dropped it on, didn't break the rings, and he was done. And so then I started thinking about it. I said, you know what? I want to be the guy on the end of the wrench, not the guy at the end of the plow. So if it wasn't for Rick, I would have been a doctor, a lawyer, or turned to a life of crime, something that really paid well, you know? And so, Rick, thank you for teaching me the value of a skill, and today I'm still working on stuff. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, it's Dennis, and I'm back. This time with a vintage 1968 Yamaha DT1. This belongs to a friend of mine, Don Greenman, who's starting to collect these very seriously. This is a very iconic motorcycle. in my opinion, it was a game changer for what's now known as dual sport, meaning that you could ride these motorcycles reliably on the street as well as trail ride and dirt ride. They made special kits and things like that for them, but the Spanish like Osa, Montesa, and Bultaco, they had their dual sport bikes too, but you had to mix the gas and oil, which was a hassle. This had oil injection. This was a reliable motorcycle. So this is a really iconic bike that really was a game changer. The other thing I wanted to say, and I forgot to earlier, is I'd like to give a big thank you and a shout out to the El Sereno Historical Society. If you ever want to know anything about this area, starting in about 1769 to pretty much into the 70s and 80s, they have a great website. So that's El Sereno Historical Society. They talk about this whole area, you know, before it became developed. About 1904, like Russ earlier was saying, things really started changing with transportation with the red car. It's January the 28th, 2024. The last time we were here was September 5th of 2020 is when this whole project kind of started. And I'm really, really glad that we did do this, because unfortunately my good friend and Wes's dad, Ricky Chew, he passed away from COVID January 14 of 2022. So Rick and Wes were like the first kind of generation of guys that we knew when we were like 12 or 13 years old when we started riding up here. And these guys were already like 15, 16, which is a big difference. But what I call the second generation of riders was Gary Lundsford and his nephew, right, Chris. They came back and they started riding the Pintons, and that's when suspension got a lot better and stuff like that. And so what I'd like to do is introduce Gary, and he's going to come up and talk for a little bit. I'm going to ask him some questions. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them.
Hi there, I'm Gary Lundsford. And I got my first motorcycle at 13 years old. I got a Honda 90 and stripped that thing all down and
that had a pressed steel frame?
Oh yeah. It was the tricked out first year motocross street legal.
Oh, it was an SL.
SL.
Oh,
looking,
that's badass.
Yeah. And we took all the mufflers off, man, stripped it all down. Ended up racing up here, learning how to do it. I raced my first race at, I think I was 14. And Jim West tells me, you want to go to the races with me? I said, yeah, I'd love to. He goes, well, meet me up at the top of the hill, at the top of the Matterhorn, and bring your toolbox and your gas can. So what do I need a toolbox for? Well, you soon found out. So I went down and asked my parents if I could go. They said no. By 5:30, I was at the top of the Matterhorn in the back of somebody's truck, heading to Ascot. I signed up. They said, "Where's your mom and dad? You're only 15 years old or 13 years, whatever I was. I can't remember. I think I was 13 years old. Yeah, you need your parents' signature." I said, "Okay." And off to the races I go. As I come flying around my first corner, I did real well. I ended up winning the race, throwing a peace sign, looking up into the audience, and who's there? My mom and my dad. The Matterhorn was deadly. This whole hillside would be on the weekend full of probably 50 cars. It looked like you went to a real racetrack. And we know everybody up and down there. You get to know all the friends.
Well, one thing that was kind of amazing was, you know, back in the day, I mean, if you were in this area, everybody, like your dad was saying originally, Ricky was saying, everybody ran open chambers. Nobody had silencers. Bikes were super loud. If you were on the street on Collis or whatever, it sounded like a beehive. My brother Norman, he said if we would have all grown up at the beach, instead of being motorcycle riders, we would have all been surfers.
Well, I'm still a surfer. I did that too also.
Okay.
And ski.
We'll both need speed and balance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I'm so glad that Gary came out, and I really appreciate Mike, Lunsford here, making all this happen, and Wes for shooting this. I hate it when I see movies or different things and that are not historically correct. And so I wasn't really sure because, it's been 50 years since I remember naming all these places. So I brought them along because hopefully we'll put names on all the different hills and get things right, and hopefully won't get in a fight or an arm wrestling match over it.
I could remember a few.
So the most famous, I think, is probably the face, right?
The Face, the Matterhorn, Wheelie Hill,
Yeah. See, I don't remember any of those names. All I
Oh,
remember
really?
is the face.
the Corner, the long one, the Straightaway, which is this big long looping thing that goes all the way down, comes all the way down to the gates of heaven. This is the heavens, and then we zip all around. It would be we could either have a short track or a Grand Prix track up here. That's what made us all really good.
What about the bottom of that valley? Remember, that's where the cops would roll up on you, and,
Yeah.
and then they would ID themselves, and you get a ticket.
Yeah.
Was that called the valley down there?
That's the valley,
Yeah,
yes,
that-
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I was chased all around the hills, and then my family brought me a pit stop because I was running out of gas. And finally, the helicopter ran out of gas and had to go refill, and I was able to get away. Didn't get a ticket
Yeah,
that
that was
day.
a game changer when the air
But I did
support-
go to jail one time for avoiding arrest. They did catch me. Yeah. It's just one of
Come
those
in
things
tighter?
that we didn't care about. We didn't care about when we were younger. We just sort of did what we wanted to do, pretty much up here.
Right.
But my dad was a police officer, so anytime I got in trouble,
But he was LAPD.
well, no, he was Cal State LA.
Okay.
He was state police.
Okay, that's before they became CHP. They
Right,
turned it over to
right,
them,
right. Well, right. But yeah, he was in the beginning stages of that. So pretty much got me out of trouble 99% of
just
the
like
time.
Jimmy West.
Just
because
like
his
Jimmy
was
West's
a
dad was a
lieutenant.
lieutenant,
Right.
and we were able to
Right.
get away with things that no one else would get away with. But Jimmy was my hero. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
And then what about Ricky? Remember how
Oh,
he
Rick-
wielded that sax?
Ricky
through all
was
the gears.
Ricky was my second hero.
Right.
And we tried to emulate him doing wheelies everywhere. This guy could wheelie up, down, around, side. I didn't care what it was. He was able to wheelie it.
Right. He was the legend.
He was a legend wheelier. So today he'd probably do pretty good out there.
For sure.
and with all the crazy stunts they have nowadays, we'd probably be doing it.
Right, because every generation that precedes the next one
Gets
has
a
to
little
keep,
better.
Has
You
to keep.
gotta
You can't
keep it
keep
up.
notching it up. Right.
Yeah, well, I notched it up from these guys. Turned professional at 16. Bought my first house cash. So that was pretty good. Well, put a good down payment. I didn't pay all cash for it, but put a great down payment.
There you go. Do you want to say a few things, Mike?
Yeah,
You can interview your uncle here.
I'll hang with you.
All right.
So I'm Mike Lundsford. I'm Gary's nephew, good friend of Dennis. My most vivid memory is when I was young riding a bicycle up here because I didn't have a motorcycle.
That was our first ride.
And I come up here and like I say, the whole straightaway was full of cars, full of bikes. Everybody was running VSA 441 Victors, the Matchless, the Triumphs.
The two guys that ran the Hodaka Super Rats.
That was Tito.
Tito.
Was his name, and
Yeah.
Rudy, his
Rudy
dad.
102, and they called him 102 because he had a van full of old beer cans from 102.
No, the whole hillside
They
where
were
he
full-
parked was
yeah,
full of,
he would just sit there and drink Brew
and
102.
then throw his can out into the. But they were steel cans, so they all rusted.
They're all
Right,
gone.
right,
yeah,
right,
they
yeah.
decomposed back into the earth. But we called him 102 because that's all
Rudy
he would,
102. Yeah.
he would drink.
And 102 was a local brewery right down here in downtown
Yeah,
LA.
downtown LA.
Yep. Eastside Brewery, I think.
But every Saturday, Sunday, this place looked like a racetrack.